The failure to act with sufficient ambition to avert the climate catastrophe will be the greatest moral failure of our time.
Making changes takes courage, and if we don't change things, we won't have a future.
I'm an environmentalist. A lot of people don't understand that. I think I know more about the environment than most people.
You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
Zero Carbon
Eastall. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 2, The Manifesto. I'm Ian Collins, and this is a kind of special Inbetweener episode. Christmas gone, the new year on the way, but of course nothing stops the biggest agenda on the planet, the environment. Our man chomping at the bit with a stash of robust views and opinion is Dale Vince, the campaigner and entrepreneur. Christmas gone, Dale. Another year of the hectic nonsense that we spoke about just a week or so ago is in the bag. We move on.
Yeah, it's been a very different kind of Christmas, isn't it, to the usual hectic environment catastrophe nonsense that you're referring to. There's been a kind of very subdued Christmas, which I was quite happy for, and it makes a change anyway. Even for people that love Christmas, it just make them appreciate the next one all the more.
Yeah, we often touch on capitalism and sort of out of control growth and that kind of thing. I mean, is this? We've touched on that issue many times that, environmentally speaking, one of the curious kind of positive offshoots of the lockdown was that there were fewer cars on the road, and that has to be a good thing. Do you think that in a similar way that, that the spend mentality of sort of Western existence might curtail itself somewhat?
Yeah, I kind of hope so, Ian. I live in hope of that, really. And, that's kind of part of the message in my book, actually, that modern life is killing us. Consumption is just running away with things and causing all kinds of problems. And Christmas is kind of like peak consumption point of the year, isn't it? I mean, it's a time of year when some shops only make enough money to get them through the year, which is a bit weird. But otherwise, the bonfire of turkey bodies and wrapping paper and all that kind of stuff is just an environment catastrophe.
Well, let's look forward because we are almost on that point. We're heading nicely to 2021, which means veganuary is gearing up, apparently for its biggest ever level of interest, going vegan for a month.
Yeah, the guys running that are aiming for 500,000 signups this year. I think 4 years ago they had maybe a quarter of that or a third of that or something like that. So, it's grown really strongly in the last few years, as has veganism. I mean, it's got to be said, the last 2 or 3 years has really seen a kind of meteoric rise of the plant-based or vegan diet, across all parts of society, including football, of course. A guy approached me at the club last night. We had a game and he said, I'm going to tell you something now you never thought you'd hear. He said, I'm going vegetarian. And I was like, well, yeah, a bit of a shock, fair play. He's a guy I never thought would. But he said, I've seen a lot of animal cruelty in films about farming and, it's just too much.
Yeah. How was last night, by the way? Or do you not want to talk about it?
No, I don't want to talk about it. It wasn't good.
Well, to be honest, I'd forgotten Crawley even existed. I'm sorry to Crawley fans listening to this, but I thought at one point, there was a swift comeback in the 50th from Jake Young, and I thought, hello, there's a turnaround here, but pesky. Tom Nichols.
Incredible goal from Youngie from a free kick. Oh my God. It was like a cannon shot into the net. Yeah. But the Crawley people are lovely. And they said to me before the game, look, you're our bogey club. We're not expecting to get much out of this, except that actually records are there to be broken, aren't they? And, I thought, yeah, fair play. It's true. All runs come to an end. I think they said they'd had 2 points off us in 6 games or something. Well, they turned that around last night and fair play to them. I didn't think we played that well. I thought they played really well. I thought they were a really good team. So I thought they deserved it.
You're very generous, Dale. I mean, you could have just really let off some steam on them there. But
that's my steam, that is, right there.
That is the Dale Vince steam in action. Let's just go back to a question about veganuary, because this comes from Liz on Twitter, who says, have you got any tips? And that's not an unreasonable question, is it? Because there are huge questions that people have that they don't quite have when it comes to becoming a vegetarian, but the idea of going vegan throws up many more variables and issues and concerns.
Yeah, it's true. It's some kind of scary frontier, isn't it? I mean, the guy I was speaking to last night, I mean, his name's Shane. I've known him a long time now, since I've been involved with Forest Green. And he said the same thing. He said, I can do vegetarian, but I'm not sure I'm ready for vegan. And it is some kind of, I think, imaginary kind of scary frontier for people. When, in fact, there's not that much of a difference, really. It's just about giving up dairy and fish. I mean, I would say that's the difference between vegetarian and vegan. But advice, I would say, just put a bit of thought into it. Really, there's an awful lot of stuff out there that's available now in supermarkets and even fast food joints. You can buy a vegan snack now pretty much as easily as you can buy a non-vegan one. It's just not as difficult as it might seem. Is what I would say. That would be my advice. It's actually quite easy. Just relax, do a bit of reading about the kinds of foods that people that don't eat animals eat, which is nuts, seeds, fruits, vegetables, kind of all the obvious stuff, really. But it's not that obvious if you're used to a diet that's dominated by a piece of dead animal in the middle of your plate.
Yeah, you said something a couple of weeks back that I thought was really interesting, that once you cut out the crap, it's amazing how good vegetables taste.
Yeah, it's true. And actually, it does broaden your horizons as well. Meat and dairy is a very limiting diet because it tends to dominate the plate and the palate, in fact. And when you move away from that, you open yourself up to a kind of entirely new world of tastes and textures. It's an adventure, I would say, a great culinary adventure.
We've got to say hello to Connie, James, Andy, Phil, and hundreds more who got in touch, sending nice comments about the manifesto, your book, of course. There goes the book bugle, right bang on cue there. This would have pitched up in certain Christmas stockings, I'd like to think, over the last few days.
Yeah, I think it must have done. And thank you guys, for all the words. Yeah, I don't know what to say really. Kind of waiting for it to gain some traction somewhere, But that's it. I guess it's because we launched it and maybe it was a bit of an anticlimax for me after that. I'm like, guys, come on, there's a book out here. Why isn't everybody reading it and talking about it? But maybe that'll come later.
I think they probably are in increasing numbers. It's one of those things, the kind of legacy, I think, of, you're right, the whole, the sweat and the toil of writing the book and putting it together and getting it published. And then you kind of have this moment where I think you're sort of expecting, there's going to be a big band outside your house in the morning. Everybody will be chanting sort of Monty Python style outside with you on a balcony addressing the braying crowd, But it's clearly out there, and it looks as if it's flying off the shelves. So good work all round.
Yeah, nice one. And as Will says to me, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Kind of probably wise words there.
Yeah, rare wise words from Will. Here's a story. The world's 10 costliest weather disasters of 2020 saw insured damages worth £150 billion. That tops the figure from the year before, which kind of reflects the long-term impact of global warming, according to a new report.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I mean, climate change, the climate crisis is becoming a serious economic cost, a real drag on global economies, a diversion really of money that could be spent on other things, for example, avoiding the climate crisis. But, the penny will drop, I think, increasingly because the insurance industry have been talking about this probably for a decade or two now. They've seen it coming through insurance claims a long time before, most people saw it. And this is where it hits home. It has to be said.
That's kind of when big corporations and companies feel the financial impact. That's when real change starts to happen. Perhaps
that's right. Money talks, or swears, as Bob Dylan would have it. But that's where the impact happens when it actually costs money. I think we see with the virus crisis that when it costs lives, that matters as well, and that has a big impact. But problem with the climate crisis is so very distant, and typically it's happening in a different part of the world to the West.
Yeah.
And it's easy just to push it to one side and think, well, we'll deal with that later. Whereas obviously the virus crisis was right in our faces, killing people. So we did something about it. And I just hope that we don't wait until the climate crisis is doing that before we really get to grips with it.
Yeah, fair point. Question from Gareth on Facebook. Why aren't we rigging up food recycling to the gas grid? What does he mean by that?
He means using waste food. I'm guessing now, but I think he means using waste food to make green gas and stick it into the gas grid, which kind of makes sense. It's a process of anaerobic digestion. You can break it down, turn it into methane. And I would say the problem we have with using waste food is that it kind of locks in the concept of wasting food, and that may sound a little bit strange, but It's a matter of kind of commerciality. If you build a project like, for example, to burn household rubbish, when councils build those projects, they sign 20-year contracts for waste, which means they're obliged to deliver a certain tonnage of waste for 20 years. That is an absolute disincentive to reducing waste. And it's the same with food waste. If you build a project to consume food waste and turn it into gas, you've got to sign long-term contracts for that food waste, which means people have to carry on wasting food, which, of course, we have to stop doing.
Indeed. Here's a question. Is nuclear fusion the answer to the climate crisis? This was a headline that screamed out of The Guardian yesterday. Promising new study suggests that long elusive technology may be capable of producing electricity for the grid by the end of the decade. So it's got that word, this will take some explaining. It's got that word nuclear in it, which I know is not a happy bedfellow with yourself.
I know. I mean, it's fine. I'd have to say I expect better of The Guardian, rightly or wrongly. I read that article. I thought this is a puff piece for the nuclear fusion lobby, who haven't really done anything new. They still haven't produced a nuclear fusion reactor that makes more energy than it takes. They still haven't done that. And to talk about it being the answer to the climate crisis, and we may have the first one built by 2030, is to kind of ignore the fact the urgent science is telling us that we have to solve this problem by 2030, not wait and hope that nuclear fusion arrives in one instance by 2030, because that wouldn't be enough on its own anyway. And the guys quoted in the article from the nuclear fusion lobby were saying crazy things like, oh, the wind and the sun, they can do a little bit, but there are things it can't do, like power cities or industry. And for that, we've got nuclear fusion. And I thought, my God, what planet do they live on? At this same time this week, there was a report that Britain had, I think, 60% of its electricity from wind power in one whole day. That's powering more than one city and more than some industry, wind and sun. I think it's a kind of example of somebody, I forget who said it to me, calls a virility project. Nuclear is exactly that kind of thing. What's wrong with using the wind and the sun? They're here, they're safe, they're clean, they're free, they don't run out. What are we waiting for? Why are we trying to dream up the next big, high-tech, super expensive fix? Nuclear fusion.
What is your reading of that? Because I put this to politicians. A lot of the stuff that we've talked about, I can then put back to some of those politicians about the wind being the obvious one. We can power this country several times over. As you say, it's free, it's clean, and you'd have to be some kind of supercharged moron to have any disagreement with something free and clean. I mean, who would say that's a terrible idea? And yet, still at the same time, and I know we can say maybe the shortcut answer is big business. Perhaps it's that. I don't know, but it does seem extraordinary that something is staring you in the face, and people are still hell-bent, it seems, on looking for something else.
Yeah, I sometimes think that it's just too easy, and actually that renewable energy just doesn't appeal to a certain mindset. There's almost a lefty-righty split, I think, psychologically. People that follow right-wing politics tend to like big oil and gas, nuclear, that kind of industrial approach, and people on the left tend to quite like the wind and the sun and that kind of almost pacifist energy approach. And as you say, it's staring us in the face. Why not embrace it? The idea also that it's a myth that we can't power ourselves just from renewable energy. I mean, that is a pervasive myth. We absolutely can. Even the national grid says that we can. These are kind of noises off stage. The nuclear fusion lobby, they've landed a piece in The Guardian, but that's not going to help them sort the tech out and actually make nuclear fusion work. I just don't see it coming. And obviously we don't need it, and we can't afford to wait for it anyway. So, I mean, what about that makes sense?
Yeah, I think a couple of episodes ago, wasn't it? I'd interviewed the managing director of the Acme Nuclear Company, whatever it's called. He was it seemed steadfast in his belief that you need a hybrid of the two. So, as I mentioned before, he was very complimentary about yourself and what you do, but says you need something that is there, almost like if nothing else, the emergency battery. For when the wind stops. I don't know if anyone's ever told him that the wind doesn't actually fully stop.
Yeah. And, it's exactly the same kind of argument that you get from the animal farming lobby and from people that just can't quite get their heads around the idea of not eating animals. They say, yeah, plant-based living and all that is it's a good thing to do, but we need a balanced diet and blah blah blah. We still need to eat some animals, which is not true. But I think it's how people in denial kind of just kind of deal with the facts.
Here's a story talking about animals. In this case, birds. Scientists discovered why thousands of songbirds dropped dead earlier this year, and this all feeds into the climate crisis. Unexpected cold snaps, etc., meant that certain breeds of bird just literally fell out the sky. I mean, there was nothing anybody apparently could have foreseen unless they bothered to look, which is the usual problem.
Yeah, I actually didn't see that story, but you reminded me of a story I did see, and I forget which part of the world it was in, but these huge, are they called murmurations? I think they are, of birds, were kind of in synchronization, jumping on and off power lines and making them smack together and cause power cuts.
Wow.
And I think it might have been Scotland, actually. And it was only by accident that somebody from the local grid company observed it happening. They were having this mysterious blackouts and they couldn't understand it. And he was out one evening and he saw this huge flock of birds all take off at the same time and caused a problem. Very funny.
Yeah, I mean, we are. I mean, on the serious side of things, we are going to be seeing more of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's as if people like Attenborough, have been warning about this for years. But this shouldn't be new news.
No, and of course, farming itself has just about, decimated our wildlife here in Britain. Over the last 50 years, we've seen an enormous decline of all kinds of indigenous British wildlife, insects, birds, mammals, and it's because of intensive factory farming. It's the same kind of thing that's happening in the Amazon. It's just that when it happens in the Amazon, we get quite precious about it, which is quite hypocritical given that we've destroyed our own Amazon here in Britain. And it's one of the great upsides of us all going plant-based. We can free up 75% of British farmland, which is 50% of the land mass of our country, and we can give it back to nature, which is an incredible outcome.
Indeed. Have a quick listen to this.
Are you Charles Bortfla?
Yeah? Who are you?
Are you?
Well, if I am, what of it?
You're in danger, sir.
Danger? What on earth are you talking about? I don't know you, do I?
No, but I know you. I followed you all the way from London.
Followed me?
Yes.
That's an excerpt from the 1956 film, The Green Man, which I'm not that familiar with, but apparently stars George Cole, him off Minder and stuff, and Terry Thomas, classic gap-toothed British aristocratic actor. But now you take on the mantle, apparently, of the name The Green Man. Rich sent this in saying, I've heard several people refer to you as The Green Man during Christmas Zoom chats about your book. Thought this was rather cool. As a fan of the pod and Ecotricity, Happy New Year, says Rich.
Well, that's fab. I like that. I'm flattered by that. So maybe I'll adopt it as a handle. But thanks, Rich.
Yeah, it's all right, The Green Man, isn't it? It's okay. I mean, I was trying to see, when people come up with kind of slogans and stuff, and they think they've really got this thing nailed, and then somebody points out that there's a connotation or a reason why you can't use it. So I don't know whether we need to have a look in that. A friend of mine was pondering why, when the government were trying to get their COVID advice out there, hands, face, space. Let fresh air in, there must have been somebody in the room that said hands, face, space, ventilate, which makes sense, of course, but you can't add the word ventilate when you're talking about COVID because of the connotation of the word ventilate. So with that in mind, I'm going to do some research on the Green Man in case we discover he was a serial killer from the outback of Australia years ago.
I think the Green Man actually is a big part of English culture. I'm not sure precisely what. I've got a book here somewhere on my shelf about the Green Man. It's also the name of the pub at Forest Green Rovers, funnily enough.
Well, there you go. Yeah, there are a few Green Mans around, aren't there, in pub terms? So.
Yeah, and I think that's because of the link to British culture, actually. That's where it comes from. It's worth looking up. If anybody's interested, just Google Green Man and see what it's all about. Something to do with fertility, I think, the kind of growing seasons and that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, this is going to become a thread. I can feel it coming on future episodes. We will follow with interest, and that is it, Dale, for this episode. That's it for this year.
Oh yeah,
our next one is definitely next year.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It's either probably a week on Friday or something like that. Have a good one, Dale, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Have a happy New Year yourself, and to everybody listening. Have a great New Year.
Indeed. Don't forget, of course, you can subscribe to this podcast. It's absolutely free. It means you'll get each new episode automatically. Do leave a review there as well. Any questions, email them over to us either via social media or zerocarboneista@ecotricity.co.uk. And really crucial bit, make sure you follow Dale on social media, which is twitter.com/DaleVince or facebook.com/DaleVince. And we'll see you in 2021.
Zero Carbon
East of